Hello there. Welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, where your imagination can roam, even while you rest. Tonight, I invite you into a journey not of dreams, but of memory written in the deepest code of your body. As you lie where you are, safe and warm, let me ask, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? The comments below are always a quiet campfire for us to gather around. And while you're here, don't forget to leave a like, to subscribe, to keep these bedtime explorations alive. Because the truth is, the story you are about to hear is so unlikely, so fragile, that you probably wouldn't survive it if you were there yourself. Yet somehow you did, through countless ancestors, and here you are, close your eyes. You drift back, not 1,000 years, not even 100,000. No, tonight you fall all the way into the abyss of deep time, 930,000 years ago, a silence begins. From billions today, from billions of voices that now fill the air with chatter and song, you are carried back to a whisper-thin existence. The population of our ancestors, the very line that leads to you, shrinks until it is no bigger than a village, maybe no larger than the crowd at your local market. Imagine the streets of a modern city, packed shoulder to shoulder, and then strip them empty until only a scattering of faces remain, looking out across an empty plain. That is humanity's truest bottleneck. The scientists who discovered it only revealed the truth recently. In 2023, a team traced your genetic story with a new tool, combing through ancient genomes like archaeologists brushing dust off fossils. They call it FitCoal, a method of finding shadows of vanished populations in strands of DNA. What they found made headlines. Our species' ancestors collapsed to as few as 1,280 breeding individuals, not in a single year, not in one catastrophic event, but stretched painfully over 117,000 years. Generations born, living, and dying, all under the shadow of near erasure. To picture it, think of the world as a road packed with traffic. Cars stream endlessly, honking, rushing, filling every lane. Then, without warning, a vast invisible hand slams the brakes. Almost every car vanishes, leaving only a thin line of headlights in the dark. That was your family line, trembling but moving forward through the void. Scientists still argue whether this collapse was evenly spread across the globe or if it was concentrated in one fragile region, perhaps Africa's heart, where drying winds stripped away the green lifelines. What they do know is that the numbers were real. The genetic signatures echo even now in the code inside your own cells. The echoes of loss are written right into your being. It is almost unthinkable. Today, 8 billion people breathe on Earth. Crowded cities hum with neon light and voices rising in chorus. Yet, if you had stood in that deep time, 900,000 years ago, you would walk for days without meeting another soul. A handful of families huddled at waterholes, moving cautiously under wide and merciless skies. At night, fires flickered low, guarded jealously because fire could vanish with the wind, leaving only cold and fear behind. If the embers died, so might your lineage. And yet, even in such desperate quiet, life had its rhythms. Children played in dust, imitating the movements of their elders. Women and men passed tools, teaching shapes chipped into stone. The taste of roasted roots, bitter but nourishing, was enough to sustain another day. And when the stars burned cold and sharp above, someone looked up, the same way you sometimes do when you cannot sleep, and wondered. Wonder itself, perhaps, was a secret that carried you through. The mainstream fact is this: our population truly plunged by about 99%, a bottleneck that could have ended us. A quirky tidbit is that, at our lowest ebb, humanity may have numbered fewer than some endangered species alive today, fewer than mountain gorillas or even some rare birds. And the open debate remains, was it global climate chaos alone that forced us so near extinction, or were there other killers stalking us, diseases, volcanic winters, unknown catastrophes now lost to time? What matters is this: you survived against the odds, against emptiness. You are here. And as your breathing slows, as your body softens into rest, you carry forward a story of survival so narrow, so unlikely, it feels almost like a dream. But it is no dream, it is the long night of humanity, and it begins with a whisper from deep time. 8 billion today. That is the noise of modern Earth. Billions of breaths, billions of footsteps, billions of tiny decisions adding up to the pulse of cities and villages alike. You hear the roar of traffic, the murmur of markets, the trill of phones, the hum of electrical lines. It is a planet crowded with sound and movement. Yet when you let yourself drift back through time, when you fall into that long corridor of prehistory, the noise dims, fades, and then collapses altogether. Imagine standing in that silence 900,000 years ago, where humanity's voice has been reduced to a faint echo. Instead of billions, there are only about 1,280 breeding individuals left alive, not spread evenly in a single group, but scattered, fragile, and thin, like dewdrops on a vast and empty plain. This is not just imagination, it is evidence carved into your very cells. Scientists uncovered this fact by tracing the scars in our DNA, the stretches where diversity is strangely thin. In 2023, researchers used a new technique, FitCol, to unspool the ancient history of population size. The algorithm works like an archaeologist of genomes, brushing away layers of time and reconstructing how many ancestors lived at any given moment. What they found was staggering. Nearly 99% of humanity vanished from the ledger of time. It was not a sudden catastrophe, but a long narrowing, a funnel stretched over 117,000 years. The population bottomed out around 930,000 years ago and stayed there until about 813,000 years ago. You may think of extinctions in terms of sudden disasters, a meteor striking, a volcano erupting, or disease sweeping through in days. But this was slower, crueler. It was as though time itself squeezed the breath out of our ancestors, pressing them down to a handful of families. Whole generations lived and died, never knowing abundance, never knowing that their descendants would one day fill the earth. Picture your modern life. Imagine if everyone you knew, your neighbors, your colleagues, your distant acquaintances, vanished overnight. Streets empty, stores locked. The crowd of 8 billion reduced to a single small town. You could walk across continents and see no one. That was the scale of humanity's plight. What caused it? The mainstream view is climate. The planet was shifting gears. Before that time, Earth's ice ages followed a rhythm of about 41,000 years. Glaciers advanced and retreated in shorter cycles. But then the beat of the planet changed. The ice ages grew longer and harsher, stretching to cycles of 100,000 years. Scientists still argue whether it was the tilt of Earth's axis or the subtle wobble of orbit that amplified the cold, but the result was the same. Climate became brutal. Africa, the likely home of our ancestors, grew drier. Rivers shrank, lakes vanished, grasslands turned to dust. Survival became a lottery of geography. If your family found a waterhole, you lived. If not, you were gone. And in that dwindling world, every child mattered. Every birth was a fragile victory against the odds. Imagine a clan of 20 gathering around a weak fire. A baby cries in the night, and the cry is a question: will there be enough food tomorrow? Will there be safety from predators? Will this little one live to pass on the memory of the tribe? With so few humans left, the loss of one infant was not just personal grief, it was a subtraction from the species itself. Here lies a quirky fact: at its smallest, humanity's population was tinier than many animal species considered endangered today. Even mountain gorillas, often called one of the rarest great apes, have a population in the thousands. Imagine a time when your entire species could fit into a small valley, fewer than some flocks of birds that take to the sky in great clouds. But science is never satisfied with one neat answer. Debate continues. Was climate truly the only force at play? Some suggest that disease could have swept small populations, hitting harder when diversity was low. Others whisper of volcanic winters, ash clouds dimming the sun. Scientists still argue whether this bottleneck was a global collapse of all human ancestors, or whether one regional population carried the burden, the survivors whose genes spread across the future. It is strange to think how your body carries the memory of this struggle. Within your genome are stretches of reduced variation, shadows of that bottleneck. Even today, humanity is less genetically diverse than many other species. That reduced diversity means shared vulnerabilities, hidden susceptibilities to certain illnesses. The price of survival was resilience, but also fragility. You carry both. The story is both terrifying and humbling. 8 billion to 1,000. A fall so sharp it almost seems impossible, yet it happened, and somehow you are here. That is the paradox. Survival from near nothingness. It is a reminder that history is not a smooth line upward, but a jagged path, with cliffs that nearly drop into oblivion. Tonight, as you lie here, let your breath slow. Imagine yourself walking through a plain where silence stretches for miles. You are one of only a handful of humans alive. Every rustle in the grass is louder because there are no voices to drown it out. Every ember of fire is precious because without it, night is nothing but dark and cold. You live with constant awareness of scarcity, and yet in your chest beats the same heart that still beats in you now. This was the great narrowing, the bottleneck. The long silence before the resurgence, and it is only the beginning of the tale you are about to drift deeper into. You carry within you a secret script, etched not in ink but in spirals of code that coil inside every cell of your body. It is your genome, a vast library of instructions, written in sequences of nucleotides, billions of letters long. Most of the time, you never notice it working. It hums silently, building proteins, repairing tissues, keeping your body alive as you listen to my voice. But tonight, as you drift into deep time, you will learn how that hidden library has been read, line by line, to uncover the greatest secret of all, that once upon a time, humanity nearly disappeared. Think of it as a diary no one meant to write, where every change, every mutation, every copy error leaves a faint scar. When scientists in 2023 set out to unravel the truth of our past, they didn't turn to fossils alone. Bones can crumble, stone tools can be lost, but DNA, it carries the whispers of every ancestor, even across hundreds of thousands of years. Using a method known as FIT-COAL, short for Fast Infinitesimal Time Coalescent, researchers traced how often certain variations appear in our genetic code. Like reading tree rings in reverse, they could see where branches narrowed, where diversity collapsed, and where only a handful of lineages survived. What they saw was astonishing. Around 930,000 years ago, the great family of humanity shrank to near invisibility. The world's population was reduced to a sliver, fewer than 1,300 breeding individuals. For over 117,000 years, humanity stayed small, barely maintaining a fragile existence. It was a slow suffocation, not a sudden blow. And the proof lies inside you, in stretches of DNA where diversity is missing, like faded pages in a book that once held many voices, but now holds only a few. Imagine your genome as an ancient manuscript. Each variation in a gene is like a different scribe's flourish, a small twist of the pen. When the population is large, the manuscript fills with countless flourishes, endless variety. But when the people dwindle, the flourishes vanish, leaving only a few consistent marks, repeated again and again. That is how scientists know the truth. Our ancestors were so few that their genetic handwriting became uniform, stamped across all who came after. You lying here tonight carry their mark, and there is something eerie about that knowledge. Every person alive today descends from those 1,000 or so survivors. Every stranger you pass in a crowded street, every voice you hear across the world, shares the same desperate lineage. It is as if the entire species passed through the eye of a needle, leaving behind a single thread that still binds us all. Scientists still argue about the exact mechanism. Was the population collapse caused solely by climate? Or was it the interplay of shifting glacial cycles, spreading droughts and other unknown forces? Could there have been disease, one so ancient it left no trace, sweeping across scattered groups? The debate continues. What is not debated is the bottleneck's reality. It exists, carved into the deepest layers of our DNA. Here is a quirky tidbit. The very method that revealed this history, FIT-COAL, works by simulating billions of genealogical trees inside a computer. It is a mathematical time machine, rolling the dice of evolution over and over until the patterns match what we see in living genomes. It means that in a way, you are listening tonight not only to history, but also to a billion simulated echoes of it, tested and retested until the truth fell into place. And yet, Though the science is complex, the reality is simple. You are here because someone then, in that distant epoch, managed to survive long enough to pass on life. Maybe it was a woman crouched by a fire, nursing her child with a body worn thin from hunger. Maybe it was a man trekking alone for days to find water, his footprints erased by wind. Maybe it was a small clan huddled in a cave, their voices quiet as predators prowled outside. Whoever they were, they endured, and in their survival is the reason you exist at all. Think about it now. Every person you love, every laugh you've shared, every story you've ever heard, all of it depends on those 1,000 or so survivors holding on across 100 millennia of hardship. Without them, there would be no you. The thought is dizzying, isn't it? You are both incredibly fragile, the child of a near-vanished line, and incredibly strong, because that line refused to break. And this truth lingers. When you look at your hands, when you breathe in and out, you are looking at a survivor's inheritance. Your body is a monument to resilience written in microscopic code. Tonight, as you sink deeper into calm, remember this. You are not just one among billions today, you are one of 1,000 threads carried through time, woven into the tapestry of humanity. So when you hear the phrase, genomes hold the secret, you now know what that means. It means that deep inside your cells is a memory older than any fossil, older than any written word, a memory of near extinction and miraculous endurance. And as you let your thoughts soften and your breathing slow, you carry that secret forward into tomorrow and beyond. The planet itself is never still. Beneath your feet, continents drift on plates of stone that float atop molten rock. Above your head, the tilt of the Earth wobbles like a slow, unsteady top. Around the sun, the orbit stretches and contracts in cycles, so long you could live a dozen lifetimes and never see them change. Yet they do change, and in those slow, grand pulses lies the reason humanity was nearly extinguished. Tonight, as you listen, you will hear how the clock of ice began to tick differently, reshaping the very stage on which your ancestors fought to survive for millions of years before the bottleneck. Earth's climate danced to a rhythm of 41,000 years. Ice would creep forward across continents, then retreat, then advance again. The glaciers moved like tides, but tides on a planetary scale, and humans, small, clever primates in Africa, learned to ride that rhythm. The changes were harsh, yes, but they were predictable. Rain would falter, then return. Lakes would shrink, then refill. Entire ecosystems knew this music, and species adjusted. Then the rhythm shifted. About 1 million years ago, the cycles lengthened, no longer 41,000 years, but 100,000. The glaciers stayed longer, pressed harder, reshaped the planet with colder, drier air. Imagine the pendulum of a clock suddenly swinging wider and slower, its beats drawn out, its silence deeper. For humans, this was catastrophic. Seasons stretched into unbearable ages, droughts lingered far longer, and the spaces where life could thrive grew smaller and smaller. You might think of the Earth as a giant breathing creature. For ages, it breathed in and out, quickly enough that forests regrew, rivers returned, and herds migrated back. But after the shift, its breath became shallow, drawn out, sometimes almost holding too long. And when the Earth holds its breath, life gasps. The mainstream fact is that scientists call this transition the early to middle Pleistocene shift. The geological record shows glaciers carving deeper paths, ocean sediments revealing longer cycles of cold, and dust layers thickening across Africa. Grasslands became brittle, forests retreated, the very cradle of humanity turned hostile. Now, imagine being one of those 1,000 survivors living through it. Day after day, the air feels sharper, the rains less frequent, the rivers where your ancestors once fished dry into cracked beds. You walk with your clan across endless plains in search of water, and every step feels heavier. You would hear the bones of animals crack underfoot, their herds thinned, their migrations broken. Nights grew colder, fires more precious, and hunger more constant. A quirky detail, even elephants, mighty and resilient, were transformed by these ages. The ancestors of modern elephants shrank during glacial periods, evolving into dwarf species on isolated islands where food was scarce. Just as humans were squeezed in number, other giants were squeezed in size. Evolution itself bent to the rhythm of the glaciers. Scientists still argue whether it was simply orbital mechanics, the tilt of Earth and its precession, that caused this shift, or whether tectonic changes, volcanic gases, and ocean currents also played roles. Some suggest the closure of certain seaways altered circulation, locking the planet into colder states. Others propose feedback loops of ice and atmosphere amplified the change. The debate remains alive, but the outcome is undeniable. Humanity's environment transformed, and with it, their survival. It is difficult for you, living in the warmth of your bed, to imagine 100,000 years of cold, a drought that outlasts generations, a landscape where children are born into scarcity and die without ever knowing abundance. But that was the stage on which your ancestors lived. Think of the ticking of a clock now, in your room, each second steady, predictable. Then imagine that clock faltering, stretching each second into minutes, each minute into hours. For humans of that age, the rhythm of the earth faltered, and survival itself stretched into near impossibility. And yet, from that impossibility came resilience. To endure, your ancestors had to adapt. They learned new routes across deserts. They discovered how to chip stones into sharper edges. They may have begun to tame fire more deliberately, carrying embers through long nights. The very challenges that threatened to erase them also forged them. So as you listen, drifting further into calm, remember this: the glaciers were not enemies, the droughts were not punishments. They were the slow ticking of Earth's clock, indifferent but powerful. And it was in learning to hear that clock, to move with it rather than against it, that humanity survived. Your body, your breath, your very heartbeat tonight are all echoes of those who endured when the rhythm changed. They heard the ice coming, felt the skies dry, and they kept moving forward, step by aching step. Africa, the cradle of humankind, was once a land of shifting abundance. Rivers meandered wide across savannas, wetlands shimmered with fish and birds, and forests offered shade, fruit, and shelter. But as the planet's rhythm changed, as glaciers locked water away in towering walls of ice far to the north, Africa's skin began to crack and dry. Tonight, you travel there, drifting with me into a world where water becomes treasure, where every drop is survival, and where humanity's numbers wither beneath the sun. Close your eyes, feel the dust. Imagine walking across a plain where grass has turned to brittle stalks, snapping under your bare feet. Once, herds of antelope thundered across these lands, but now only a few bones remain, whitening under the heat. Lakes that stretched wide enough to reflect the whole sky shrink into shallow puddles, their edges rimmed with cracked mud. The air itself tastes like thirst. This is Africa during the bottleneck, a land where survival is no longer about strength or speed, but about finding the last trickles of life. The mainstream fact is that climate records show widespread aridification across Africa during this time. Sediments reveal dust storms sweeping across what was once fertile soil. Fossil pollen tells us that forests gave way to deserts, grasslands faded into bare earth. Scientists call this one of the driest intervals in African prehistory. For your ancestors, it was not just a weather report, it was life reduced to chance. Picture yourself crouching at the edge of a shrinking waterhole. The surface is green with algae, insects skimming across it. Your clan gathers around, wary, for predators also thirst. Lions, desperate and thin, stalk nearby. Crocodiles lurk in the shallows, waiting for the moment you dip your hands, and yet you must risk it, because thirst burns hotter than fear. A child drinks, her lips trembling. She may live another day because of this single muddy sip. Quirky fact: some early humans may have used animal dung, even crocodile dung, mixed with water and ash as a crude form of sun protection, smeared on their skin to shield against blistering rays. It may sound strange to you, lying safe tonight, but under that relentless sun, even the oddest tricks meant survival. So when you hear of people rubbing earth, clay, or dung onto skin, remember that these were not just customs, they were lifelines. Scientists still argue whether the bottleneck's root cause was this long drought alone, or whether it was one strand in a braid of disasters. Could volcanic eruptions have darkened skies, further reducing rainfall? Could disease have thrived in crowded waterholes, wiping out entire families? Some argue that populations outside Africa might have existed, but failed to leave descendants, their genetic lines vanishing like dry rivers. The debate continues, a reminder that history is never fully written, only pieced together from fragments. But what we do know is that Africa's drying shaped everything. With resources scarce, your ancestors had to roam further, to split into smaller groups. They became wanderers of necessity, moving silently across landscapes where each decision was heavy. To stay meant starvation, to go meant risk. And so they learned to map the land in memory, where roots could be dug, where caves held shade, where animals still passed. At night the land cooled, but the thirst did not fade. Around small fires, families guarded embers, as if they were gold. A spark could mean the difference between warmth and freezing darkness, between cooking a root into something edible or chewing it raw and bitter. The flames also kept predators at bay, a fragile circle of light in a vast darkness. Imagine yourself staring into such a fire, knowing that beyond its glow lies the unknown, hyenas, leopards, the endless hunger of the wild. And yet, in this crucible of scarcity, humanity's spirit did not break. If anything, it sharpened. Hunger forced creativity, drought forced memory, thirst forced cooperation. Perhaps one night, as the fire crackled, an elder told a child, "This place was green once. Follow the stars, and you will find water again." That teaching passed forward, may have been the thin line between extinction and endurance. So as you breathe tonight, remember this: the land you walk upon, the air you breathe, the safety you know, were once denied to your ancestors. They lived on the edge of emptiness, yet they did not fall. Africa dried to dust, but within that dust seeds of resilience grew, and those seeds are still alive in you. The night is heavy, but the fire is alive. You crouch close, your skin warmed by the faint glow, your ears tuned to the sounds beyond the circle of light. Around you, your family, perhaps no more than a dozen souls, gathers tight. The day has been long, the sun merciless, the search for water uncertain, but for now there is comfort in the fire's crackle, in the low hum of voices telling stories, in the small illusion of safety. This is life 900,000 years ago, when the human population teetered on the edge of vanishing. You must understand, fire was not yet mastered in the way you know it. Matches, lighters, even sparks from striking metal were far in the future. Your ancestors may have captured flames from lightning-struck trees or smoldering grasslands, carrying them carefully in bundles of dry material. To lose fire was to return to darkness, to vulnerability, to the teeth of predators. So families guarded their flames as if they were members of the clan, feeding them with twigs and brush, never letting them die. Imagine the intimacy of such nights. A small group huddled close, children tucked between elders, smoke rising in thin threads into the star-pricked sky. Every sound in the distance made your heart race, a branch breaking, a low growl, the soft pad of paws. Yet within the circle, stories were shared, perhaps gestures and guttural sounds, perhaps the earliest roots of language. Around this fire, humanity was forged, not just in survival, but in community. The mainstream fact is that evidence of controlled fire use by early humans appears around this time. Some archaeologists place it close to 800,000 years ago. Charred bones and heated stones found in ancient sites tell us that fire was more than an accident. It was becoming part of daily life, a skill slowly spreading among groups. This mastery transformed everything. Food could be cooked, making it easier to digest and safer to eat. Dangerous roots, toxic when raw, became edible. Meat softened and released more nutrients. Fire was warmth, protection, and technology wrapped in one. Now picture the scene more vividly. A root dug from dry soil, hard and bitter in your hand. You toss it into the embers, wait, then pull it free, the skin blackened, the inside soft. You bite, and though it is smoky and strange, your body absorbs energy more easily. That extra strength means you can walk further tomorrow, survive another drought. Fire turned desperation into resilience, one ember at a time. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some researchers believe that early humans might have accidentally discovered roasting seeds or nuts, leading to flavors far richer than raw versions. Imagine the surprise of tasting something unexpectedly sweet, a tiny delight in a world otherwise ruled by scarcity. Such accidental discoveries may have encouraged your ancestors to experiment more, to seek transformation in flame. but science is rarely unanimous. Archaeologists and anthropologists still argue whether fire at this point was truly controlled or merely captured. Did small clans know how to spark it themselves, or did they only preserve flames found in nature? The debate lingers like smoke. Was humanity already a firemaker, or still a careful firekeeper? Either way, its presence reshaped survival, and more than that, fire reshaped society. It gathered people together. Unlike daylight hunting or gathering, which scattered clans across the landscape, fire was a center point. It demanded attention. It drew bodies close. Around its glow, bonds strengthened. Perhaps elders began to teach more deliberately, using gestures in the firelight. Perhaps songs or chants emerged, rhythms rising with the flames. The beginnings of culture, fragile, flickering, may have been born in those circles of light. Now let your mind soften and imagine yourself in that circle. The warmth against your skin, the flickering shadows on stone walls, the soft murmur of voices blending with the hiss of burning wood. Your own breath mingles with the smoke, and above you, the Milky Way spreads vast and unblinking. In that moment, you are both vulnerable and eternal, a single human clinging to survival, yet also a link in a chain that stretches all the way to this present night. Scientists have long noted that fire changed not just diet, but biology. Cooked food meant less time chewing, smaller jaws, and more energy for brain growth. Some argue that the mastery of flame directly fueled the expansion of human intelligence. Imagine that, your thoughts tonight, your dreams, even the act of listening to this story, may be traced back to the taste of roasted roots by a fire 1,000,000 years ago. And yet, even with fire, life was perilous. Flames could go out in rain. Predators could attack despite the light. A single accident could wipe out an entire group. Still, the persistence to carry embers, to strike stones, to keep flame alive, became part of human identity. It was resilience embodied in sparks. So here you are, safe in your own night, perhaps with the faint glow of a lamp nearby. But as you breathe and settle deeper, imagine the fire of your ancestors. See its orange light on their faces. Hear the crackle that once meant safety and survival. Feel the warmth that carried them through the long dark ages of near extinction. That fire has never gone out. It lives still, in your technology, in your gatherings, in the simple act of telling stories in the dark. Your hands are rough, the skin split from digging roots and carrying stones. Hunger drives you to search for more than berries and scraps of meat left by predators. In the quiet of the Pleistocene night, you bend down to lift a stone, its edges sharp where it fractured. You strike it against another, sparks of possibility flying in the air. This is where the story of tools deepens, where survival becomes not just about endurance but about invention. For hundreds of thousands of years before the bottleneck, early humans had used simple tools, flakes chipped from rocks, heavy stones to smash bones, sticks sharpened into digging poles. But during the long drought and the crushing scarcity, these tools became more than conveniences. They became lifelines. Imagine gnawing at a bone without a sharp edge. The marrow inside, rich with fat, would remain locked away. With a sharp flake you can crack it open, scoop it out, and live another day. That single edge of stone might mean the difference between life and death. The mainstream fact is that around this time, archaeologists find evidence of Acheulean hand axes, tear-shaped tools carefully chipped from both sides. They were not random rocks but crafted objects, shaped with purpose. This shows your ancestors were not merely scavengers but thinkers, planning steps ahead. A stone chipped in a certain way today could still be useful tomorrow, a tool to carry across landscapes. Picture it. You sit cross-legged, a rock in one hand, a hammerstone in the other. With each strike, flakes fly, sharp and dangerous. You pause, turn the stone, strike again. Slowly the shape emerges, symmetrical, balanced, something that fits in your palm like an extension of your hand. This tool is more than stone, it is thought made visible. And though it may sound ordinary to you now, in a world of machines and screens, it was revolutionary. These tools expanded what your ancestors could eat, hunt, and build. They carved hides, scraped wood, dug into hard earth. They became companions on long treks, carried from camp to camp like trusted friends. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists believe that these tools were not only practical but may have also carried social meaning. A beautifully shaped hand axe might have been a signal of skill, of intelligence, perhaps even of attractiveness. Imagine someone offering you a perfectly chipped stone as proof of their worth. In a small clan where survival depended on cooperation, such symbols may have mattered deeply. Scientists still argue whether tool-making spread evenly among all groups, or if only certain pockets of humans mastered the craft while others lagged behind. Some believe that small isolated populations may have even forgotten techniques, only to rediscover them later. The debate continues, reminding us that progress is rarely a straight line. It is fragile, sometimes lost, sometimes reborn. But tools meant more than survival, they meant teaching. Picture an elder guiding a child's hands, showing how to strike stone against stone, correcting the angle, the pressure, the rhythm. Knowledge passed not just through instinct but through deliberate instruction. This is one of the roots of culture, the slow weaving of skill across generations. Without such teaching, the knowledge would vanish with one life. With it, humanity gained continuity, and as your ancestors learned to shape stone, they were also shaping their minds. Planning, precision, patience, all of these were trained in the act of tool-making. Each strike demanded foresight, each flake removed in service of a larger design. Over thousands of years, these habits sculpted brains as surely as they sculpted rock. The growing capacity for abstraction, for imagining outcomes before they happened, was born in the rhythm of stone on stone. Imagine now that you are sitting at that ancient camp. The sound of stone strikes echoes across the plain, sharp and ringing. Sparks flash briefly in the dim light. Children watch, eyes wide, as a tool takes form. When it is done, it is passed around, admired, perhaps even envied. And tomorrow, it will slice through tough hide, crack open bone, or dig into stubborn soil. A tool that began as thought will sustain life in action. The bottleneck tested humanity, not only in body but in mind. With numbers so few, mistakes could not be afforded. Tools became amplifiers of effort, a way to stretch meager strength further, to turn fragile hands into instruments of survival. Every stone tool was a statement: we are small but we are clever, and you, lying here now, still carry that inheritance. The devices you use, the machines that surround you, the technologies of your world, all of them trace back to those first hand axes, to those first sharp flakes held by trembling hands. They are echoes of invention born in desperation. So let your breath slow and steady, the way a toolmaker steadies their hands before the strike. Feel the patience in your body, the rhythm in your chest. The same rhythm guided your ancestors as they transformed stone into survival, and in that rhythm, humanity endured, one chipped edge at a time. Deep inside your body, hidden within the quiet spirals of DNA, lies a scar. You cannot see it, you cannot feel it, but every one of your cells carries its mark. It is the fusion of two chromosomes into one, a strange ancient accident that became a permanent feature of humanity. Tonight, you drift not only across landscapes of drought and firelight, but also into the microscopic world, where history is written in threads of code. Apes, your cousins, have 48 chromosomes. Gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, all of them share this number. But you, and every human you have ever met, carry only 46. Somewhere in that long bottleneck, two ancestral chromosomes fused end to end, leaving a molecular scar. It did not kill the lineage. Instead, it endured, passed on from parent to child, until it defined an entire species. The mainstream fact is clear. Human chromosome 2 is the product of this fusion. Scientists can see the remnants, telomere sequences, normally found at the ends of chromosomes, appear in the middle of chromosome 2, like an ancient seam. Two centromeres, the anchors for cell division, also remain, though one has long since gone silent. These are not guesses but physical evidence, etched in every human genome. It is as if your DNA carries a fossil, a permanent reminder of the day two became one. Picture it. In one single individual, hundreds of thousands of years ago, this fusion occurred. A child was born carrying 47 chromosomes. That child survived, grew, and had offspring. Slowly, generation by generation, the fused chromosomes spread until it became universal. Now, everyone listening tonight carries it, a quiet signature of the strangeness of evolution. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some researchers speculate that this fusion may have been more than a random quirk. They note that genes near the fusion point are involved in brain development, immune response, and fertility. Could it be that this fusion gave our ancestors a subtle advantage, one that helped them endure the bottleneck? Or was it merely luck, a coincidence preserved by small population size? No one knows for certain. Scientists still argue whether the chromosome 2 fusion directly influenced human evolution, or whether it was simply carried along by chance. Some propose it could have played a role in separating early humans from their ape relatives, a step toward the uniqueness of Homo sapiens. Others caution against reading too much into it, reminding us that evolution is rarely the story of single events. The debate lingers, as sharp as ever. But imagine yourself as one of those few survivors during the bottleneck, unaware of the quiet drama inside your cells. You carry the fusion without knowing. You feel hunger, you seek water, you guard fire, and all the while, your very chromosomes are shifting the future of humanity. That is the poetry of biology. Change happens invisibly, yet its consequences echo across hundreds of thousands of years. Now picture the scene from a wider angle. Fossils are scarce during this period, nearly absent for 300,000 years. The record falls silent, as if humanity itself left barely a trace. And yet, within your genome, the silence is broken by evidence like this. While the land forgot, your DNA remembered. Each of your cells is a library, and chromosome 2 is one of its most dramatic volumes. Think of it like a scar passed down the generations, not from a wound of skin but from a wound in the genetic script. Every time your cells divide, every time they copy DNA, they carry the memory of that ancient joining. It is as if humanity's near extinction left not only stories but also marks that cannot be erased. As you lie here, safe and still, let your mind drift into that microscopic world. Imagine the chromosomes unfurling, long strings of code glowing faintly. You see two pieces snapped together, awkward at first, then sealed by time. That fusion glimmers inside you even now, proof that you are the child of a lineage that refused to vanish. And yet, consider how fragile it all was. Had that child with 47 chromosomes not survived, the fusion would have disappeared. Had the bottleneck been harsher, the line might have ended. Your existence depends not only on survival in the desert and around firelight, but also on invisible quirks of biology. Every breath you take is balanced on the edge of chance. So tonight, when you hear that a chromosome's strange fusion lies within you, know that it is more than a fact. It is a reminder that survival is written in both the vastness of climate and the minuteness of DNA. The glaciers sculpted the world above, while chromosomes sculpted the world within, and between them, somehow, your ancestors carried forward the light. Let your breathing slow now, steady as the turning of the earth. You are the heir to stars and ice, to fire and stone, and even to the silent fusion of chromosomes. Your body is a storybook, each page inscribed with struggles you never knew, each word a testament that against all odds, you are here. The earth keeps records in stone, but sometimes the record falls silent. For nearly 300,000 years, spanning the darkest stretch of the human bottleneck, fossils of our ancestors are painfully scarce. It is as if humanity stepped off the stage of history, leaving barely a footprint, barely a bone, a whisper lost to time. Tonight, you drift with me into that silence, a world where the story of your lineage is written less in bones and more in the absences between them. Archaeologists know this gap well. From about 950,000 years ago to roughly 650,000 years ago, the fossil record thins dramatically. Where before there were skulls, teeth, and fragments scattered across Africa and Eurasia, suddenly the evidence fades. Entire landscapes that once yielded fossils seem empty. To the scientists who dig, this is puzzling. But to those who carry the genetic scars of that era, to you the reason is painfully clear. There were so few humans left that the odds of their bones surviving into the future shrank almost to nothing. The mainstream fact is this: The bottleneck left not only a genetic scar but also a fossil silence. If only about 1,280 breeding individuals existed for over 100 millennia, their remains would be vanishingly rare. Fossilization itself is already a game of chance. Bones must be buried quickly, protected from weather and scavengers, and then discovered millions of years later. With populations so small, the likelihood of enough fossils forming and surviving dwindled close to zero. Now imagine the world from their perspective. A small clan trudges across a barren plain. They leave faint footprints in dust that the wind soon erases. When one of them dies, their body is left to the elements or to scavengers. Hyenas crack the bones, vultures strip the flesh. What remains is scattered, broken, unburied. The earth does not preserve them in stone, and so for thousands of years, humanity all but vanishes from the physical record. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some paleoanthropologists call this interval the fossil gap or black hole of human origins, because even though we know humans survived, the evidence is frustratingly sparse. It is like trying to follow a trail only to have it dissolve into sand. For researchers, this gap is both maddening and tantalizing, because it suggests that crucial evolutionary events happened in the shadows, unseen, undocumented. Scientists still argue about what this silence means. Some suggest that humans were reduced to such tiny scattered populations that fossils simply never formed in significant numbers. Others wonder if the survivors lived in regions less conducive to fossilization, perhaps wetter zones where bones decayed quickly, or highlands where sediment did not preserve remains. A few argue that we simply have not yet dug in the right places, that the earth still hides the bones that would tell the missing chapters of our story. The debate lingers, unresolved. But you can imagine it, can't you? Walking across a world where your kind is so rare that you could wander for days and never see another. You drink from a lonely pool, you sleep in a cave with only your family, and when one of you dies, the earth swallows the evidence. No trace for future eyes, no bones in museums, no skulls to measure, just silence. And yet, silence is not absence. While the fossils are missing, your DNA remembers. The bottleneck carved its story into the genome, leaving signals that modern science can detect. The fossil record may fall quiet, but the genetic record whispers unbroken. Together they tell the same truth. Humanity was nearly erased. Think of it like a book with torn-out chapters. You hold the volume and pages 10 through 20 are gone. The story leaps forward, and you are left to wonder what happened in between. That is the fossil gap. But instead of words, the missing pages are bones. Instead of ink, the record is stone. And in their absence, you are forced to reconstruct the story from the fragments that remain. Imagine again those lost humans. A woman walks with her child, carrying embers wrapped in leaves. She leaves no fossil. A man sharpens a stone tool, teaching his son how to strike. He leaves no fossil. A child laughs in the firelight, then grows, then dies, her bones lost to rain and roots. She leaves no fossil. Yet each of them lived, and without them, you would not exist. The fossil silence is haunting because it reminds you that most lives vanish without a trace. Only a tiny fraction of bones endure. Yet their absence speaks too, reminding us how fragile survival was. When you look at the gaps in the record, you are staring into the very thinness of your lineage. And as you lie here tonight, letting your breath slow, think of how close you came to being one of those vanished stories. Think of how easily humanity could have been lost, remembered by no fossils, carried by no DNA, gone forever. Yet somehow through fire, tools, drought and silence, the thread continued. And tonight, you listen because they endured. The sun rises pale over the savannah, but its warmth is cruel rather than kind. The ground beneath your bare feet cracks like old pottery, fissures spreading wide across the earth. Your tongue is dry. Your clan has been walking for days, following the ghosts of rivers that no longer flow. This is the long thirst, not a single drought, not a season of scarcity, but lifetimes upon lifetimes of dryness. Whole generations were born into thirst and died before the rains returned. To survive here meant learning to live with a body always aching for water, a mind always scanning for signs of its hidden presence. Scientists can trace this story in layers of earth. The mainstream fact is clear. Sediments from this period tell us of mega-droughts across Africa, vast stretches of time when rainfall dwindled and lakes disappeared. pollen grains, trapped in ancient mud, reveal forests retreating, grasslands turning barren. These weren't short interruptions but enduring climates, centuries stacked into millennia, where rain came rarely, unpredictably, sometimes not at all. For your ancestors, this meant more than discomfort. It meant that the very foundation of life slipped away. Imagine the decisions your clan faced each day. Do you stay near a shrinking pool of water, risking conflict with other desperate creatures, or do you leave, wandering into the unknown, in the faint hope of finding another? Each choice carried danger. A wrong turn meant starvation, or death by thirst. Even the right choice brought only temporary relief, for every waterhole was temporary in those days. Picture yourself approaching one of these last pools. The mud clings to your feet, and the smell of decay rises from the shallows. Animals crowd here, antelope, zebras, even predators too thirsty to fight. The silence is broken by the groans of dying beasts, the occasional splash of a crocodile striking from the dark water. Your clan must drink carefully, always watching, always alert. The water is warm, foul, but it is life. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists speculate that early humans developed a practice of storing water in animal stomachs or gourds, carried across long distances. It would have been clumsy, heavy and strange, but when rivers vanished, ingenuity mattered more than elegance. Imagine carrying a sloshing skin of water across dry plains, its smell pungent, but its contents vital. This improvisation may have been one of the quiet inventions that allowed humanity to endure. Scientists still argue whether drought alone could explain the bottleneck. Some believe it was the primary driver, relentless and inescapable. Others argue that drought was compounded by cold glacial winds, by food scarcity, by diseases thriving in weakened bodies. Perhaps multiple catastrophes wove together into the tapestry of near extinction. The debates continue, but all agree that thirst was one of the hardest trials your ancestors faced. And think of the psychology of thirst. Hunger is sharp, but can be endured for days. Thirst, though, is immediate. The mouth dries, the lips crack, the skin burns, decision-making falters, tempers flare. Imagine your clan huddled in the shade of a rock, tempers rising as thirst gnaws at patience. Even love strains under thirst. And yet, somehow they endured, passing knowledge from one generation to the next, where roots could be dug for moisture, which plants hid drops within their stems, which animals to follow to find hidden springs. At night, thirst did not vanish. Dreams were haunted by the sound of rain that never came. Children cried softly, lips parched, voices weak. Parents whispered comfort. They did not feel themselves. And when death came, as it often did, the living still had to walk forward. Grief was carried alongside thirst, both unquenchable, both part of the endless journey. The open scholarly debates stretch beyond climate. Some scientists wonder whether the very pressure of drought accelerated cooperation and communication. Did thirst force humans to share more deliberately, to form tighter bonds, to develop the roots of language so that directions to hidden springs could be passed across miles and generations? Was survival through thirst the birthplace of our greatest strength, the ability to coordinate, to plan, to teach? You may never know the exact answer, but you can feel its echo. Every time you sip clear water tonight, every time you fill a glass without fear, you are enjoying what your ancestors could not. And yet, you are also carrying their resilience. Your body is still built to conserve water, to endure scarcity. Your kidneys, your sweat glands, even your thirst itself, they are ancient tools shaped by this endless drought. So as you lie in your safe room, imagine walking across that dry plain, lips cracked, heart pounding, yet still moving forward. Imagine the sound of distant thunder, a promise of rain that might never fall. Imagine the joy if a storm finally came, drops hissing on hot earth, your clan dancing in the mud, mouths open to the sky. That joy would be unlike anything you have ever felt. The long thirst shaped humanity in silence. It taught patience, endurance, and ingenuity. It was cruel, but it was also formative. And as you drift toward rest, remember that every sip you take today, every glass of water at your bedside, is connected to that ancient struggle. You are not only the heir of fire and stone but also of thirst, and of the wisdom to endure it. The world does not stay barren forever. Even the longest drought eventually bends. Even the cruelest dry spell gives way. After lifetimes of dust and silence, the rains returned. Slowly at first, shy drizzles that darkened the cracked ground but vanished before they could sink deep. Then, in time, the skies opened, and the green began to creep back. Tonight you walk with your ancestors into this long-awaited renewal, into the cautious return of abundance after uncounted generations of thirst. Imagine standing on a ridge, looking out at a plain that only your grandparents knew as lifeless. Now the grasses are stirring again, thin but persistent. A pool of water glitters in the distance, shallow but real. The air smells different, wetter, alive. The songs of insects return, and with them, the birds. Herds begin to move once more across the horizon. It is not yet paradise, but compared to the silence of drought, it is salvation. The mainstream fact is that climate records confirm cycles of relief after the harshest arid phases. Layers of sediment show wetter periods between mega droughts, windows of opportunity when life could flourish again. For humanity, these windows were like breaths taken between long submersions. Clans that had clung desperately to life now found more space, more food, more hope. Populations began to expand slowly, cautiously, as if the earth were offering a second chance. Imagine the joy of finding a stream flowing again, its water cool against cracked lips. Children would laugh, splashing in the shallows. Hunters would track animals with more success, following fresh prints in soft mud rather than dust. Women would gather roots that had grown fat beneath damp soil, berries that glistened with juice. Nights around the fire would still be uncertain, but bellies would be fuller, spirits lighter. A quirky tidbit: some researchers believe that these greener intervals may have encouraged humans to migrate further, chasing the rains. As grasslands expanded, your ancestors followed animals into new territories. This movement may have laid the groundwork for the great dispersals to come, journeys that eventually carried humans beyond Africa, though that was still far in the future. In this way, the returning rains were not only relief but also temptation, pulling clans into motion. Scientists still argue whether these wet periods were widespread enough to support large populations, or whether they remained patchy, isolated pockets of refuge in a still hostile world. Were there lush corridors linking distant groups, or were humans still scattered, living in green islands surrounded by deserts? The debates continue, with each new discovery of ancient lake shores and riverbeds adding fragments to the picture. But what matters most is how it must have felt. Imagine entire lifetimes spent in thirst, stories told of ancestors who died searching for water, and then, one day, rain begins to fall again. For your clan, the sound of droplets hitting leaves would have been like music. The smell of wet earth would have been intoxicating. Every mouthful of water would have tasted like a miracle. Yet abundance carried new challenges. More water meant more animals, and more predators. Crocodiles returned to the rivers, lions grew stronger, and competition sharpened. Other human clans might appear, their presence both a threat and a chance for exchange. With food to share, there was also reason to fight. Survival never became simple, it only changed shape. Still, these green periods offered breathing space. With less desperate hunger, your ancestors could devote more time to teaching, to shaping better tools, to experimenting with fire. Around the flames at night, new stories were told, not only of fear and scarcity, but of renewal, of rains that had returned after the long silence. Those stories carried hope, passed into the ears of children who might never remember the worst of the drought. And hope is as vital as food or water. It gave strength to walk further, to endure when the rains faltered again, to believe that survival was more than chance. Perhaps this hope encouraged your ancestors to look beyond the horizon, to imagine life in places they had never seen. Every green shoot that pushed through soil was both nourishment and symbol. So as you breathe quietly tonight, picture that renewal. See the grasses trembling in the wind, hear the insects humming, feel the coolness of a river against your skin. You carry this memory in your very being, the relief of rains after thirst, the return of green after dust. Your life is not only the legacy of survival in drought, but also the joy of renewal. When the world softened once more, the earth exhaled, humanity inhaled, and with that breath your story continued. The rains did more than feed rivers. They reshaped the paths of your ancestors, nudging them into new territories, separating families, and scattering groups across landscapes that now held pockets of green amidst the wider barrens. Where once a handful of clans may have clung together for survival, the returning abundance gave them choices. They could split, wander, explore. Some stayed near familiar rivers, others pushed into mountains, valleys, and coasts. And in this scattering, humanity began to splinter into different lineages. Kin who would one day bear names like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually modern humans. The mainstream fact is this: genetic studies suggest that after the bottleneck eased, populations diverged. One group, remaining largely in Africa, would later become Homo sapiens. Others drifted into Eurasia, evolving along separate paths into Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Asia. Though they all shared the same fragile origin, their journeys shaped them differently. Climate, geography, and time carved cousins out of brothers and sisters. Imagine your own family splitting tonight. Half of you remain in your home, clinging to the familiar. The others set off into the dark, promising to return but never doing so. Generations later, their children no longer know yours. Their voices sound different. Their tools take different shapes. Their faces are subtly changed. That is how human lineages diverged. Not through sudden rupture, but through slow drift across time and distance. Picture it more vividly. A small group crosses a mountain pass, never to see their kin again. They settle in a colder land where winters bite harder. Their bodies grow stockier, their noses broader, adaptations to conserve heat and breathe icy air. Meanwhile, another group moves eastward, into forests and high plateaus. There their children adapt to new challenges, developing traits that help them thrive in thinner air, harsher seasons. Each path forges a slightly different humanity. Here is a quirky tidbit. When Denisovan DNA was first discovered in modern people, it came not from fossils but from genetics. A tiny bone fragment from a Siberian cave revealed a whole new cousin species. What made it extraordinary was not the fragment itself, but the fact that living humans, especially in Oceania and Southeast Asia, still carry up to 6% of Denisovan DNA. It is as if ghosts of lost cousins walk quietly within your blood. Scientists still argue about the timing of these divergences. Did Neanderthals split from Denisovans early, or were they one population for longer than we think? Did Homo sapiens remain isolated in Africa before leaving, or was there occasional contact across continents even earlier? The debates are alive, because each new fossil or fragment of DNA redraws the family tree. What is certain is that humanity's near extinction did not end with a single path, but branched into many. Think of it like rivers flowing from one spring. At first, there is only one trickle, a fragile thread of water, but as it moves down the slope, it divides into streams, then into tributaries. Each river still carries the memory of the spring, but each shapes the land differently. Humanity was that spring. From it flowed Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans, all carrying the scars of the bottleneck, all shaped by their own landscapes. And yet these lineages were never entirely separate. Though they diverged, they would meet again. Much later, when Homo sapiens ventured out of Africa, they encountered their cousins. There was not only conflict, but also mingling, bloodlines crossing, genes exchanged. The echoes of those unions remain in you today. You are not purely Homo sapiens, you are a mosaic of many ancient lineages, stitched together across millennia. But in this moment of the story, the separation has just begun. Picture a campfire at the edge of a forest. Families sit together, knowing that tomorrow some will go one way, some another. They embrace, share the last of the food, and part at dawn. None of them knows that this parting will last, not for years but for hundreds of thousands of years. None of them knows that their descendants will carry new names, new faces, new destinies. And you lying here tonight, carry all of them still. In your genome are fragments of Neanderthal, whispers of Denisovan, and the dominant song of Homo sapiens. You are not the heir of one lineage, but of all. Their choices to split, to wander, to adapt, are the reason you exist. So let your breath slow, steady as the flow of rivers dividing. You are the spring and the tributary, the source and the journey. Your ancestors splintered into kinship lines, and from that scattering, humanity grew richer, stranger, and more enduring. The night is alive with sparks. You sit by the fire watching as twigs snap and flames leap, painting the faces of your kin in shifting light. But this fire is different from the ones before. It is not an ember stolen from a lightning strike, not a smouldering branch carried precariously from a distant tree. This fire has been made, deliberately, with skill and intent, and once humans learned not just to guard fire but to kindle it, everything changed. The mainstream fact is that around 800,000 years ago, evidence of deliberate fire use becomes more consistent. Archaeological sites from Israel to Africa reveal hearths with charred bones, burned wood, and layers of ash that suggest repeated, controlled burning. Fire was no longer just an accident to be captured. It had become a tool mastered, passed down, spread clan by clan, and with fire, humans crossed a threshold. Imagine the wonder of that first spark. Someone, perhaps by striking stones together or spinning sticks until heat built, coaxed a tiny flame into life. At first, it must have seemed like magic, heat and light born from dead matter. But with patience, with repetition, this magic became knowledge. Soon, every clan sought to learn, to carry, to protect. Fire was more than survival. It was power. Picture the transformations it brought. Meat once eaten raw and tough, now sizzled on the flames, its fibers softened, its flavors released. Dangerous tubers and roots, toxic when raw, became nourishing when roasted. Fire unlocked calories hidden before, allowing bodies and brains to grow stronger. With cooked food, less energy was needed for digestion, freeing energy for other functions, including the ever-expanding human mind. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some scientists suggest that the very act of gathering around fire at night may have shaped human social bonds. Flames cast light that extended the day, creating hours for sharing stories, songs, and teachings. The flicker of fire may have been the cradle of culture itself. You can still feel it today. Think of how people gather around campfires, fireplaces, or even glowing screens, drawn instinctively to light in the darkness. Scientists still argue over when exactly humanity gained true control over fire. Some evidence points to earlier flickers, nearly 1,000,000 years ago, while others argue that mastery came later, perhaps 600,000 or 700,000 years ago. The debate continues. Was fire discovered many times by many groups, or was it a single spark of knowledge passed like a secret through generations? Whatever the case, its spread was inevitable, for fire was too powerful to ignore. Now imagine what life was like with this new mastery. Nights no longer belonged fully to predators. Firelight kept the darkness at bay, eyes of hunters glinting at the edge of the glow but rarely daring to cross it. Warmth meant survival through cold nights, allowing humans to push into harsher climates. Smoke drove away insects. Ash could preserve food or protect skin. With fire, the world itself bent differently around your ancestors. But the transformation was not only practical. Around fire, people looked into the flames and saw stories. Shadows danced on cave walls, sparking imagination. The first myths may have been born there, not spoken in full language yet, but gestured, sung, half-whispered. Fire gave humans not just safety but meaning, a space to dream. Picture the scene, children staring into flames, their eyes wide, their minds filled with images they could not explain. Elders pointing, teaching, their faces painted by orange light. The crackle of wood punctuating the rhythm of early words. In those circles, culture began to germinate, fragile as sparks but destined to spread. And you feel this even now. Fire calms you, its glow lulls you, its warmth reassures you. You are hardwired to love it because fire carried your ancestors through the bottleneck, through the drought, through the silence. Without it, humanity might have faded entirely, yet mastery came with danger. Flames could consume camps if not controlled. Sparks could blind, burns could scar. There must have been accidents, tragedies, mistakes. And yet, the risk was worth it, for fire offered more than it took. It was both destroyer and savior, a paradox that humans learned to balance. So as you lie here tonight, safe in your bed, perhaps with a small light glowing beside you, remember that you are still a creature of fire. The heat in your home, the electricity powering your world, even the glowing screen through which you hear these words, all are descendants of that first mastery of flame. The spark that once warmed trembling hands now illuminates entire cities. The ember carried across plains has become the energy of civilization. The spark spreads still, it has never gone out. And within you, as within every human alive, there is a deep memory of huddling close to the fire, whispering stories in its light. That memory will never fade, for it is woven into your very being. You rise before dawn, the fire still glowing faintly behind you, its embers carefully buried under ash to protect them until night returns. The air is crisp, and you walk into a valley where shadows cling to the earth. As the mist lifts, you see them, not animals, not predators, but others. They move like you, walk like you, their hands carrying tools, their eyes glancing with recognition. They are human, but not quite the same. Tonight, as you drift with me, you will meet your cousins, Neanderthals and Denisovans, the kin who shared this fragile planet and whose blood still runs within you. The mainstream fact is this: after the bottleneck eased, human lineages diverged. One branch, Neanderthals, adapted to Europe and the western parts of Asia, their stocky bodies built to withstand the cold. Another branch, the Denisovans, spread eastward into Asia, adapting to mountains and forests. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens remained in Africa, growing and changing, until they too stepped out to meet their cousins. These encounters were not fleeting. For tens of thousands of years, the lineages overlapped, sometimes in conflict, sometimes in mingling, always shaping one another's fate. Imagine the first encounter. Your clan approaches a river to drink, only to see a group already there. They stand tall, their brows heavy, their faces broad, their eyes sharp. They do not look exactly like you, but they are close enough that you feel an uncanny recognition. Are they rivals? Are they prey? Or are they kin? In that moment, fear and curiosity mingle, and slowly as days pass, contact becomes exchange, a tool offered, a gesture mimicked, a glance that carries meaning. Archaeologists have long wondered how these meetings played out. Some sites suggest conflict, wounds in bones, fortifications in caves, hints of violence, but other evidence suggests cooperation and shared knowledge. Tools of similar style appear in overlapping regions, as though ideas spread from one group to another, and of course, the strongest evidence of mingling lies not in bones but in genes. You carry it yourself. If you are of non-African descent, about 2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. In some populations, particularly in Oceania and Southeast Asia, up to 6% comes from Denisovans. Here is a quirky tidbit. Denisovan DNA helps modern Tibetans live in high altitudes. A specific gene variant, passed down from those ancient cousins, allows people to thrive where oxygen is thin. Even now, as climbers scale Everest or monks meditate on Himalayan peaks, they draw on the inheritance of cousins long vanished from the earth. Scientists still argue about the nature of these interactions. Were they rare events, occasional unions on the edge of survival, or were they more frequent, with clans mingling over centuries? Were they consensual, cooperative, or forced by conflict? The truth is probably a mixture of all. Humanity's story is rarely simple, and the bonds of blood are rarely clean. Imagine again sitting by a fire, your clan huddled close. In the distance, another fire flickers, not yours, not your kin's, but theirs. You feel both threatened and comforted. The world is not as empty as it once seemed. In time, paths cross. Perhaps your hunters join forces to bring down larger game. Perhaps children from both groups play in the dust together. Perhaps there is suspicion, a wary peace broken by sudden violence. All of these moments together weave the fabric of what it meant to be human in those days. The mingling changed us forever. Without Neanderthals and Denisovans, you would not be who you are. Their genes shaped immunity, skin, hair, even the way your body responds to sunlight. You are not purely Homo sapiens. No one is. You are a living mosaic, a walking tapestry of ancestors, both direct and distant, remembered and forgotten. And yet the differences mattered too. Neanderthals, though skilled and intelligent, may have lacked the same degree of social networks as sapiens. Denisovans, though adapted to mountains, left few fossils, their story mostly hidden. When the final reckoning came, Homo sapiens endured while the others faded. But in this chapter of history, all three lived side by side, cousins in the same fragile world. Picture the moment of recognition, your eyes meeting theirs across a clearing, the firelight flickering between you. You see yourself reflected, but not entirely. It is unsettling and profound, and in that moment, the boundaries between us and them blur, not yet the hard lines that later generations would draw. As you lie here tonight, let your breath soften. Imagine the quiet of two fires burning in the dark, two clans alive at the same time, each shaping the other. You carry their memory not only in your genes, but in the very rhythm of your species, a rhythm of encounter, exchange and survival. The others are gone now, their bones buried, their names given only by science. But they are not truly gone. They live in you, in all of us, whispering from the blood. And when you dream tonight, perhaps you will dream of them, the cousins you never met, but who helped shape the person you are. The fire burns low, and the night is quiet. Across from you, a figure sits, broad-browed, heavy-jawed, their shadow flickering on the rock wall. They are not of your clan, not quite of your kind, and yet when they smile, the gesture feels familiar. Tonight, we sink into the deep truth that these meetings with your cousins were not only encounters of tools or ideas, but of blood. You are living proof of this. For within you, within every breath you take, flow fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan inheritance. The mainstream fact is that modern humans outside of Africa carry about 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some populations in Oceania and Southeast Asia carry as much as 6% Denisovan DNA. This is not speculation. It is mapped in your genome, as real as your own eyes. These fragments influence your skin, your immunity, even the way your body responds to the environment. When you catch yourself adapting to cold, or when your blood defends against certain pathogens, you are drawing on the gifts of ancient unions long forgotten. Imagine one of those nights when two clans came together. Perhaps it was around a shared waterhole, perhaps after a joint hunt. Eyes met across firelight, hands touched, curiosity overcame fear. In a world so empty of people, connection was both rare and irresistible. Children born of such unions carried blended inheritance, their very existence, a bridge between lineages. Those children grew, taught, loved, and passed on genes that would travel through time until they reached you. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some Neanderthal DNA in modern humans is associated with sleep patterns and mood regulation. Imagine that, the way you drift to rest tonight, the very rhythm of your circadian clock, may be shaped by the ancient blood of cousins whose fires burned out 40,000 years ago. Even your dreams may carry their whispers. Scientists still argue about the extent and frequency of this interbreeding. Were these rare, isolated events, occasional sparks across long divides, or was mingling common, a steady flow of genes over millennia? Some propose waves of contact, each adding new threads to the genetic tapestry. Others suggest the exchanges were sporadic, fragile in number but immense in consequence. The debates continue, fueled by each new fossil, each new sequence of DNA recovered from ancient bones. But what is beyond debate is that these unions changed humanity forever. Without them, your genome would be emptier, your resilience weaker. The bottleneck stripped away diversity, but mingling restored some of what was lost. In a way, Neanderthals and Denisovans helped rescue sapiens, gifting strength that carried through the ages. Picture now a child of such union, born in a cave warmed by fire. Their features bear both lineages, the robust build of one, the delicate traits of the other. Their laughter echoes against stone walls, their steps light on the earth. They do not know they are history's experiment, yet they carry the future in their veins. They live, they love, and through them, the boundaries between us and them blur forever. And you, lying here tonight, are their descendant. Your body is a mosaic of ancient encounters. Your cells remember. Every time you look at your hands, your reflection, you see not just Homo sapiens but a tapestry of kin who shared the earth before vanishing. Consider how strange it is to think of yourself as a gathering of ghosts. In your blood run the shadows of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and countless unknowns whose names we will never know. They did not survive as separate species, but they survived in you. You are their monument, walking and breathing. Let your breath deepen now, slow and steady. Imagine two fires burning in the dark, their smoke rising into the same sky. Around one, your direct ancestors sit. Around the other, their cousins. Between them lies a narrow space, but across it, sparks fly, sparks of genes, sparks of union. Those sparks did not fade, they became you. So when you think of yourself as human, remember that the word is larger than you know. It holds multitudes, it carries kinship that extends far beyond a single species. You are the descendant of meetings across rivers and valleys, of bonds formed in hunger and hope, of blood shared across time. Sleep now, carrying this truth gently. You are never alone. You are the sum of many, a chorus of ancestors speaking softly through your veins. The winds sweep across the plain, carrying whispers of change. The Neanderthals are strong, the Denisovans clever, yet it is your ancestors, Homo sapiens, who will endure when others fade. Tonight we step into the question of why. Why did one lineage rise while the others fell into silence? Why are you here breathing in this moment, while the cousins who once shared the earth exist only as fragments in your blood? The answer is not a single reason, but a constellation of them, glowing like stars above the ancient fires. The mainstream fact is that most anthropologists agree Homo sapiens possessed unique advantages, adaptability, wider social networks and language abilities that allowed rapid sharing of knowledge. Where Neanderthals may have thrived in smaller, tightly knit groups, sapiens linked clans into webs that stretched across landscapes. When a tool was invented, it did not remain with one family. It spread, carried by stories, by teaching, by the bonds of cooperation. That speed of innovation gave sapiens an edge in a harsh and unpredictable world. Picture this: a sudden frost covers the land. One small clan struggles, but through shared networks, news travels, of caves where warmth lingers, of roots hidden beneath snow, of rivers that remain unfrozen. Information becomes survival. Sapiens did not just live in groups, they lived in societies, fragile but expansive, and that difference multiplied across generations, tilted the balance. A quirky tidbit: some researchers suggest that Neanderthals may have had smaller trade networks, limited mostly to local groups. Their stone tools were excellent, often more finely crafted than those of sapiens, but innovations traveled slowly, if at all. By contrast, sapiens created vast information highways where even distant clans could benefit from new ideas. In this way, humanity's strength was not just in invention but in connection. Scientists still argue about how decisive language was in this story. Did Homo sapiens have fully developed symbolic speech, while Neanderthals did not? Some evidence suggests Neanderthals had the anatomical capacity for speech, yet their cultural artifacts are fewer, less abundant in symbolic meaning. Others propose that Neanderthals communicated richly, but their smaller group sizes limited how far knowledge could spread. The debate continues, but what cannot be denied is that sapiens left behind cave paintings, ornaments, and ritual burials, signs of imagination flowing through language and art. Imagine yourself sitting with your ancestors as they carve shapes into stone or paint animals on cave walls. Each gesture carries not just function but meaning. A child points at the painting and understands this is a story, this is a lesson. Through such symbols, sapiens wove connections beyond the here and now, reaching into past and future. Neanderthals and Denisovans may have lived brilliantly, but sapiens dreamed collectively. That dreaming became destiny. Adaptability was another key. Neanderthals were superbly built for cold, but when climates shifted, their bodies and cultures struggled to keep pace. Sapiens, leaner and more versatile, adjusted quickly. They changed diets, crafted clothing, developed new tools. Where others specialized, sapiens improvised. Think of it like a river. Neanderthals were a mighty current flowing powerfully in one direction. Sapiens were a delta, splitting into many channels, able to shift course when the land changed. Now imagine two neighboring camps, one Neanderthal, one sapiens. The Neanderthal hunters return with mammoth meat, enough to feed the group for weeks, but their strategies depend on herds that may vanish tomorrow. The sapiens hunters bring back less, but they also gather plants, fish rivers, and trade with another clan. When the herds move away, the Neanderthals weaken, the sapiens endure. Your inheritance is not strength of arm or sharpness of tooth. It is adaptability, the willingness to change, to learn, to cooperate. That is why you are here. And yet the differences were not absolute. There are hints that Neanderthals also made jewelry, painted caves, even buried their dead with care. They were not less human, only differently human. But in the end, their numbers dwindled while sapiens multiplied. Some joined your bloodlines through interbreeding, but their independent lineages disappeared. You are left to wonder whether they might have endured had chance tilted differently. So as you lie here tonight, reflect on this truth. Your survival was not inevitable. It was the outcome of countless small advantages, a wider circle, a better memory, a more flexible plan. You are alive because your ancestors did not cling to one way of being. They bent with the winds of change. They learned to share, to dream, to weave meaning into survival. Let your breath move gently now, in and out, steady as a story carried across generations. You are the descendant of survivors, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most adaptable, the most connected, the most willing to change. That is why sapiens endured. That is why you are here, listening in the dark, carrying their story forward. Even survival has a price. Your ancestors endured the bottleneck. They crossed deserts and droughts, they mastered fire and spread tools, they mingled with cousins and wove networks of resilience. But as the human population shrank and then slowly rebounded, something invisible happened in the background. A richness was lost, not in songs or stories, but in the very code of life. Tonight you sink with me into the hidden cost of that survival, the loss of genetic diversity. The mainstream fact is sobering. Studies suggest that the bottleneck erased about 65% of human genetic variety. In other words, the pool of differences that had once existed among early humans shrank dramatically. With only about 1,280 breeding individuals alive at the lowest point, many genetic variants disappeared forever. The result is that even today, humanity is less genetically diverse than many other species. Compared to chimpanzees, for example, humans are startlingly uniform. Where other species carry wide reservoirs of variation to draw upon, your lineage carries scars of that great thinning. Why does this matter? Genetic diversity is a shield. It is what allows a population to resist disease, to adapt to changing environments, to evolve new strengths. Imagine it as a library of survival strategies. Before the bottleneck, the shelves were full, crowded with many possible answers to the challenges of life. Afterward, 2/3 of the books were gone. Your ancestors carried the remaining volumes forward, but the shelves were forever emptier. Picture this in a scene. A clan gathers around a sick child. The fever is high, the body weak. If the group were larger and more genetically varied, perhaps someone might carry a resistant gene, a defense against the sickness. But in a small population with so few variants left, survival depends only on chance. Sometimes the child lives, sometimes not. Over generations, this lack of diversity left hidden vulnerabilities you still carry today. Here is a quirky tidbit. Certain diseases that haunt modern humanity, like autoimmune disorders, may be partly shaped by this ancient loss of variety. Our immune systems, trimmed and simplified during the bottleneck, sometimes overreact in confusion, attacking the body itself. In this way, you feel echoes of that near extinction in illnesses centuries removed. Scientists still argue about how much this loss shaped human destiny. Did the bottleneck make us more vulnerable overall, or did it clear the path for rapid evolution by concentrating certain traits? Some argue that the reduction accelerated selection, amplifying useful adaptations. Others warn that it left us permanently at risk, with too narrow a margin for future change. The debate continues, circling like vultures around bones that have long since turned to dust, but you can feel its reality. Look around your world today, billions of humans, yet astonishingly alike in DNA. You share 99.9% of your code with every stranger you pass. That sameness is a testament to the bottleneck, proof that you are all descendants of a very small, very fragile group. You are diverse in culture, language, and thought, but beneath the surface you are a single thread spun tightly. Now imagine walking through the ancient world with this hidden weakness. A drought strikes. If one group of humans cannot endure it, there are no distant cousins with different adaptations to take their place. A disease spreads. It sweeps through clans more easily because the genetic shields are thinner. Every challenge is riskier because the pool of defenses has shrunk. And yet, paradoxically, it is this very fragility that makes survival more remarkable. Your ancestors walked a tightrope without a net. One wrong step, one catastrophe too great, and the line could have snapped, yet it did not. Somehow, against all odds, the fragile thread held. Think of it as carrying a torch in the wind. The flame flickers, nearly extinguished, but those carrying it shield it with their hands, with their bodies, with their determination. Generation after generation, they protected that fragile flame, even as diversity fell away. And because they did, you hold that torch now. Let your breath steady, slow and quiet. Feel your own body as a vessel of survival, not perfect, not invincible, but resilient. You are here because your ancestors walked through scarcity with limited tools, because they endured sickness with limited shields, because they kept walking forward when almost everything was lost. So when you think of the bottleneck, remember this: it was not only a time of near extinction, but also a pruning of possibility. Much was lost, but what remained was enough. Enough to carry forward, enough to grow, enough to reach this moment. You are the proof. You are the descendant not only of survival, but of survival at great cost. And knowing that cost, carrying the memory of it gently, makes the life you live now all the more precious. The fire crackles softly, and the night stretches long. You know that your ancestors survived the great narrowing, but even now, with all the science and all the clues hidden in your genome, the truth of how remains unsettled. Tonight we wander into the realm of questions, the open debates that echo through lecture halls and dig sites, through genetic labs and whispered campfire stories, because even in the 21st century, the bottleneck of 900,000 years ago remains a puzzle with missing pieces. The mainstream fact is that scientists agree the bottleneck happened. The genetic evidence is too strong to ignore. The signals in your DNA, the lack of variation, the long stretches of similarity, the fingerprints of population collapse, all point to that narrowing. The numbers are clear. At one point, no more than about 1,280 breeding individuals carried the fate of the species. What remains uncertain is why, what drove humanity to the brink. What combination of forces pressed so tightly that the line nearly snapped? Some point to climate. The early to middle Pleistocene transition was brutal. Glacial cycles lengthened, droughts spread across Africa, and ecosystems collapsed. In this view, it was simply the Earth's great clock shifting gears, and humans were caught in the machinery. But others argue this cannot be the whole story. After all, other species endured the same shifts. Elephants, antelope, birds, even predators, many struggled, but none experienced quite the same scale of collapse. Was there something particular to humanity, some vulnerability unique to our line? A quirky tidbit. One theory suggests volcanic winters may have compounded the climate crisis. Massive eruptions could have filled the skies with ash, cooling the planet, dimming the sun. Crops of wild plants would have failed, prey animals would have dwindled. Imagine entire years where the sky stayed grey, where the warmth of the sun barely touched the earth. In such times, even the most resilient clans might have faltered. Scientists still argue whether disease played a hidden role. Could pathogens, unknown and untraceable now, have spread through tiny weakened populations, wiping out entire groups? Some propose that the closeness of humans to animals at waterholes created perfect breeding grounds for early zoonotic diseases. Others counter that with numbers already so low, disease would have burned out quickly, having nowhere left to spread. The debate circles endlessly. Then there is geography. Perhaps the bottleneck was not evenly spread across the globe. Maybe it was concentrated in one region, most likely Africa, where evidence suggests humans remained, while other groups elsewhere simply vanished without leaving descendants. This idea would mean that humanity's survival hinged on a single geographic cradle, a small zone of refuge where just enough water and food remained. If that is true, then every human alive today descends from that one fragile enclave. But here again, disagreement reigns. Was survival localized, or was the collapse global? Imagine what this means for you. Your very existence depends on questions that remain unanswered. If survival was local, then your ancestors huddled in one narrow region, a tiny oasis in a vast wasteland. If global, then the entire species was pressed thin across continents. In either case, the story is one of razor-thin margins. Picture the scene. A small group sits by a fire, unaware that somewhere across the plains, scientists of the future will debate their fate. To them, it is not theory but reality. The drought is real, the hunger sharp, the predators close. They are not concerned with debates, only with seeing another sunrise. Yet their survival, their persistence becomes the subject of centuries of speculation. And the debates continue because every discovery adds both answers and new questions. A fossil emerges from the ground, and it hints at survival where none was expected. A fragment of DNA is sequenced, and it suggests contact across greater distances. Each piece sharpens the picture, while also blurring its edges. That is the paradox of science. The more we know, the more we see the vastness of what we do not. Here is where imagination joins the conversation. Scientists may argue, but you can feel the weight of their uncertainty as you listen tonight. Was it fire alone that carried humans through? Was it flexibility of diet? Was it sheer luck? A few well-placed springs, a few births at the right time. Survival can hinge on something as small as a single ember, a single rain, a single child born strong enough to live. And perhaps the truth is not one answer, but many. Climate, drought, disease, geography, chance, woven together into a net that nearly broke but somehow held. The bottleneck is a mystery not because it never happened, but because survival itself is messy, complex, impossible to reduce to one neat cause. So as you lie here, let yourself sink into the questions, let the uncertainty soothe you. You do not need every answer to honor the story. What matters is that survival happened, that the fragile thread carried forward. You are proof of it, regardless of the debates. Your body carries certainty, the bottleneck left its mark. But your mind can cradle the uncertainty too, the wide-open spaces of maybe, and what if, for that is also human to survive, to wonder, to question. The debates may never end, and perhaps they should not. The mystery itself is part of the gift. The silence after near extinction is not emptiness. It is a teacher. For 117,000 years, humanity balanced on the edge of disappearance. And when the population finally began to grow again, it did so with lessons carved deep into flesh and memory. Tonight, we walk into those ashes, into the wisdom drawn from hardship, into the parable of resilience that still whispers through your blood. The mainstream fact is that once the bottleneck ended, human numbers began to climb rapidly. Around 813,000 years ago, populations expanded again, spreading into new regions, diversifying in culture and adaptation. From that fragile handful of survivors came billions, filling the earth with voices once more. It was a rebirth, an expansion that carried the weight of all that had been nearly lost. But expansion did not erase the memory of suffering. Imagine how habits formed in scarcity remained long after the rains returned. Your ancestors did not waste food. They carried fire carefully. They passed on stories of thirst and hunger to children who had never lived it. Even when resources grew more plentiful, the discipline of survival lingered. This is what shaped humanity's instincts, the drive to hoard, to plan, to imagine disaster even in times of plenty. You still feel these instincts today when you store, when you worry, when you prepare. They are echoes of the bottleneck. Picture a clan finally reaching a valley where water flows abundantly again. The river glitters under sunlight. Animals gather on its banks. Trees lean heavy with fruit. Children laugh, splashing in the water. Yet the adults, even as they drink and smile, glance at the sky, remembering when rain failed, when rivers vanished. Joy is tempered by vigilance. Relief is braided with caution. Such is the psychology of survival. Abundance is always haunted by memory. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists believe that rituals of offering, leaving food, water, or fire for unseen forces, may have roots in this deep memory of scarcity. To give away something valuable was not just superstition, it was a way of acknowledging that survival itself was a gift, not to be taken for granted. Even today, in traditions across the world, people pour water to the earth or leave food at altars. Perhaps these customs carry the echo of ancient gratitude, a thank you whispered across nearly 1,000,000 years. Scientists still argue about how much the bottleneck shaped culture versus biology. Was resilience mostly genetic, favoring those who could endure disease and hunger? Or was it cultural, forged in stories, teaching and cooperation? The answer is likely both. Genes provided the foundation, but culture multiplied the effect, ensuring lessons outlived individuals. The debate continues, but what cannot be denied is that the survivors were not merely lucky, they were adaptable in mind as well as body. Now imagine the daily lives of these post-bottleneck clans. With more water and food, groups grew larger, connections between clans strengthened, trade routes began to form, ideas spread faster, yet the habits of caution remained. Every ember was guarded, every journey planned. Children were raised not only to play but to remember, to know where to find hidden routes, to know how to carry fire, to know how to walk under stars to the next river. These teachings were insurance against the return of catastrophe. The parable is clear. Humanity endured not by strength alone, but by resilience, memory, and cooperation. Your ancestors did not forget the silence of drought. They carried it with them, and in doing so, they built a foundation strong enough to weather future storms. Think of your own life. You live in a world of abundance compared to theirs, water at the turn of a tap, food at the reach of a hand. And yet, when disaster strikes, when scarcity looms, the same instincts rise. You plan, you gather, you adapt. That is the inheritance of the bottleneck, the ability to survive through resilience rather than sheer numbers. Let your breath slow now, gentle as a river returning after drought. Picture ashes glowing faintly in the dark, lessons preserved like coals waiting to ignite. From those ashes, humanity learned endurance, learned gratitude, learned caution, and you carry those lessons still, etched not only in your body but in your very ways of thinking. The near extinction of your species was not the end, but a teacher. From it came wisdom, resilience, and the quiet strength that whispers even now, as you drift toward rest. The ashes were not wasted, they were the soil in which your story grew. The fire has burned through the night, and the horizon begins to glow with the first suggestion of dawn. This is where your journey through deep time brings you to the world you know, to the fragile present balanced on the long shadow of the past. Tonight, as we close this story, we gather all the threads, the bottleneck, the fire, the mingling with cousins, the scarcity, the resilience, the near disappearance, and the slow return. And we ask, what does it mean here and now to carry such a story in your blood? The mainstream fact is that every human alive today descends from that narrow population of roughly 1,280 ancestors. No matter what language you speak, what country you live in, or what shape your face takes in the mirror, you are kin, because the bottleneck tied all threads together. Diversity was trimmed, but in the pruning, a shared root remained. That is why scientists say humanity is one of the most genetically unified species on Earth. Beneath your differences lies an almost eerie sameness, born of survival through the edge of extinction. Picture yourself in a crowd, a city square, a marketplace, a concert hall, faces all around you, each unique, each a story, yet underneath, every one of those people carries the same thread, woven from the same fragile group that once huddled by a fire, desperate for survival. Billions alive today, yet all cousins many times over. The bottleneck may have narrowed humanity, but it also bound you into one vast family. Here is a quirky tidbit. Despite this genetic sameness, humans still find endless ways to divide, by tribe, by nation, by appearance, by belief. And yet, compared to other animals, you are staggeringly alike. A troop of chimpanzees from two valleys may be more genetically diverse than two humans from opposite sides of the globe. So the divisions you cling to are illusions, paper walls draped across the truth that you are one. Scientists still argue about the long-term meaning of the bottleneck. Did it doom us to fragility, to vulnerabilities hidden in our shallow gene pool, or did it unite us, sharpen us and prepare us to spread farther than any species before? Perhaps it did both, binding risk and strength together in one package. The debate will continue, but the lesson is already clear. Survival is fragile, precious, and never to be taken for granted. Imagine the final scene. You stand at the edge of a cave, dawn spilling light across the land. Behind you, the embers glow faintly. Before you, valleys stretch, rivers gleam, mountains rise. The clan beside you is small, only dozens of souls, yet from them will come a world of billions. You feel the weight of possibility in the morning air. The silence of near extinction is giving way to the song of survival, and here you are, carrying that song forward. Your breath tonight is the echo of their breath, Your heartbeat is their heartbeat, stretched across time. When you lie down to rest, when you wake to a new day, you continue a story nearly lost. So what do you take from this? That fragility is not weakness. That resilience is stronger than numbers. That unity hidden in your blood is a gift greater than any difference. And that every dawn you witness is a triumph written nearly 1,000,000 years ago, when your ancestors held the flame against the darkness and chose to keep walking. Let your breath soften now. Let the story dissolve into calm. The journey is complete, but its lessons remain. You are not alone, and you never were. You are bound to all who came before, and to all who will follow, by the fragile thread that did not break. Now the story fades into stillness. The fires of the past grow dim, and the voices of your ancestors drift like echoes into the distance. You no longer need to picture droughts or shadows, predators or scarcity. Let them slip away, like smoke lifting into the sky, leaving only the calm that follows endurance. Your breath is steady now, deep and slow. With each exhale, imagine yourself laying down the weight of millions of years. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw release, your eyes grow heavy. You are safe here, wrapped not by wilderness, but by the walls of your own room, by the gentle silence of this moment. The story has carried you across deserts and glaciers, through firelight and fear, into the very bottleneck of existence. And now you return with a gift, the knowledge that survival is within you, not as struggle, but as quiet strength. The ancestors who nearly vanished whisper to you in the rhythm of your breath, you are here, and that is enough. Let the dawn fade to soft grey. Let the fire burn to ash. Let the world outside slip into silence. You are allowed to rest, to dream, to float free of time. All of history has delivered you to this quiet night, to this bed, to this breath. And in that thought, you can let go. Good night, dear traveller. Sleep deeply, and may your dreams carry you not into drought or fear, but into endless fields of calm, where the story is only peace.